My name is Robert, I'm 44, and I never imagined it'd be writing something like this, let alone confessing it in a place like this, to strangers. I've always thought of myself as a practical man, analytical, reserved, a bit of a homebody, but over the last few years, life has this way of shaking you awake in ways you can't predict. I married Emily when I was 31, and for a while, everything felt like a kind of fairy tale, only slower, more domestic. By 42, we were comfortably numb in our routine. Our marriage felt more like a well-maintained habit than a romance. It wasn't that I didn't notice the little things, or that Emily didn't try to mask her dissatisfaction. But I had responsibilities, a high-pressure job, bills, the usual suburban life entanglements, and I convinced myself that everything was fine because we hadn't had any catastrophic fights. And she still smiled at me in those rare moments when our worlds briefly intersected. I told myself, isn't this what long-term commitment looks like? Then the change started subtly. I came home one Thursday to find her in the kitchen, phone pressed against her ear, cheeks slightly flushed, laughing in a way I didn't recognize. She ended the call abruptly when she saw me, muttering something about a work friend. I asked no questions at the time, chalking it up to my own paranoia, but a small seed of unease had been planted. Over the next few months, these seeds grew into a forest I couldn't ignore. It wasn't the phone calls alone. She started spending more nights at the office, dressing differently, caring more about small things I used to take for granted: her hair, her perfume, the way she lingered at the mirror. I confronted her once, clumsily, half-heartedly, and she reassured me with that practiced smile that made me want to believe her. But deep down, I felt it. Something was off, and I didn't know how to stop the slow-motion unraveling of the life I thought I had built. I found out about the affair the way most people do in bad movies, through a small, careless mistake. A message on her tablet I picked up absent-mindedly, something like, "Can't wait for tonight, it's been too long." My first thought was denial. I read it again. My heart pounded. The next few days were a haze of paranoia and silent observation. I tracked her movements obsessively, watched as she hid messages, deleted call logs, lied with a casualness that felt like knives in my gut. It's strange how betrayal changes the world. Colors are sharper, sounds are louder, and every smile or glance feels like a calculated performance. I started replaying our marriage in my mind, searching for the exact moment it all went wrong. Was it the move to this city? My long hours at the firm? The time I ignored her when she needed me most? I have no idea, and maybe it doesn't matter. What mattered was the truth I could no longer escape. Emily, the woman I vowed to love, the woman I thought I knew, was someone else entirely when I wasn't looking. I confronted her one night. We sat in the dim light of the living room, the silence stretching like an accusation. She didn't deny it. She didn't cry. She looked at me with this strange mixture of guilt and relief, as if carrying the secret had exhausted her more than my discovery. She explained, though no explanation could soften the blow. She said she felt neglected, unappreciated, that I was emotionally absent, and that someone else made her feel seen again. Part of me understood, in a cold, rational way. Another part shattered. After that night, I couldn't sleep in the same bed. The house felt different, each room a reminder of everything I had lost. I started journaling obsessively, trying to make sense of my anger, my grief, my shame. Friends noticed I had changed. I smiled less. I drank more. I stopped going to the gym. Work became my only refuge, though even there, I was haunted by thoughts of her, of him, of the endless questions that had no answers. I know I should have left. Everyone tells me I should have. But there was a strange, irrational attachment that kept me there: hope that things could return to normal, hope that she would regret, hope that some part of the woman I married was still in there somewhere. Months passed. Therapy didn't help as much as it promised. Conversations ended in arguments or silence. She became more distant, more secretive, and I became more obsessive, more broken. I want to tell you about the day I saw them together. Not in person, thank God, but in a photograph accidentally left open on her laptop screen. It was at a cafe, the casual intimacy undeniable. I couldn't breathe. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. I closed the laptop, but the image stayed. It stayed in my mind, on repeat, in every idle moment. I felt like a ghost in my own life, watching someone else take what was mine and realizing I could do nothing but exist in the aftermath. The irony, I realized, is that love and betrayal are so intertwined that you can't separate them without destroying yourself. I still love her. I hate her. I hate myself for loving her while knowing the truth. I wake up at night wondering what my life would have been if I had noticed sooner, if I had been more attentive, more loving, more vigilant. But I also wake up knowing that nothing I do now will change the past. Sometimes I imagine telling the story to strangers because it's safer than telling it to anyone who knows me. Strangers won't pity me, they won't bring judgment, family drama, or unwanted advice. Here, behind the veil of anonymity, I can admit the raw, ugly truth that I am 44, betrayed, and still aching for someone who has walked away from me emotionally, if not physically. That I am learning to live with a new reality I never asked for, and I don't know if I'll ever forgive her or myself. Every day is a struggle between moving on and being consumed. I see her across the room sometimes, and memories hit like tidal waves. Our first apartment, our wedding day, the nights we stayed up talking about nothing, the mundane moments that once felt like love. And I wonder, was any of it real? Or was it all just preparation for this betrayal, this slow, relentless heartbreak? I have no grand conclusion, no advice, no moral. Only this: pain changes you. Betrayal reshapes your world. And real love is not always enough to keep someone from leaving it behind. The weeks after that photograph felt endless. Every routine, every familiar corner of the house became a trigger. I started avoiding the places we once frequented together, our favorite cafe, the little bookstore on Main Street, even the park bench where we first kissed. Each memory was a knife twisting slowly, and yet I couldn't bring myself to remove them from my life entirely. Part of me clung to the past like a lifeline, while the rest of me was drowning in it. Work became my escape, though it offered no real relief. I buried myself in spreadsheets, reports, meetings I barely listened to. My colleagues noticed the change. I could see the concern in their eyes, but their questions felt intrusive, and I didn't have the energy to explain the complexity of quiet devastation. In some ways, I envied them their normal, uncomplicated lives. I started noticing things I had ignored before. The way she moved around the house, careful not to touch the things that belonged to me. The way her laughter carried a weight I couldn't reach. The small sighs she let slip when she thought I wasn't watching. I caught her sometimes staring at the phone with a tenderness that wasn't mine. I began to catalog her behavior like evidence, a private obsession that consumed hours of my day. Late at night, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how much of our marriage had been a performance. I remembered our wedding day vividly, the soft hum of the church organ, the way she held my hand, the laughter, the joy. I wondered if she had felt the same way I did that day, or if she had already been drifting, unconsciously, toward someone else. It was a thought that poisoned me from the inside, and I couldn't shake it. Sometimes I confronted her again, carefully, almost gently, testing the waters, trying to see if any part of her regretted it. Each time, she deflected, her eyes flickering with emotions she refused to name. Anger, guilt, excitement, relief. I could see all of it and none of it at once, and the ambiguity was unbearable. I wanted clarity, but clarity was impossible. I started thinking about leaving, but even that seemed impossible. The house was ours, the life we built was entangled, and the idea of starting over was terrifying. More than anything, I feared the emptiness, the silent acknowledgement that she had chosen someone else, that the life I thought I had was irretrievably gone. I stayed, a prisoner in my own home, watching her, measuring her, imagining the unseen moments she shared with him. Sleep became elusive. I would wake at odd hours, haunted by dreams that felt like confessions and accusations simultaneously. Sometimes I dreamed of confronting him, imagining a scene that was half fantasy, half nightmare. Other times, I dreamed of her walking away with him, and I was powerless to stop it. Each dream left a residue of anxiety and despair that no caffeine or morning routine could dispel. I found solace in small acts of control, fixing things around the house, reorganizing closets, meticulously planning my day. It was absurd, I know, but in these tiny victories, I felt a semblance of power. The betrayal had stolen so much from me: trust, intimacy, peace, but it hadn't yet claimed the entire narrative of my life. I clung to that, even if it was fragile. Emily noticed the change in me, too. She started avoiding certain topics, leaving the room when I came home early, whispering apologies that I no longer trusted. She would brush past me in the hallway, her presence familiar yet alien, and I would catch my reflection in a mirror, see the hollowed eyes, the stiff posture, the grief etched into my face. I barely recognized myself anymore. Then came the day I found the gift. It wasn't a physical object, not really, but a set of messages she had carelessly left on a shared computer. They were filled with the casual intimacy that only develops between two people who have chosen secrecy over honesty. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. I wanted to scream, to tear the laptop apart, to demand an explanation that could never be satisfactory. But instead, I just sat numb, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of the neighborhood that went on, oblivious to the wreckage in our home. For days after, I barely spoke. I ate little. I existed in a fog, moving through our shared space like a ghost. Friends called, worried, and I gave them vague reassurances, nothing more. I couldn't bear to speak aloud the things that haunted me. The truth was too sharp, too invasive. My marriage, my home, the life I had believed in, it all felt like a fragile thought ready to collapse at any moment. And yet, even in this devastation, there were moments of absurdity. I would catch myself laughing at a memory, or noticing the way she had left her scarf on the couch, and the sheer normalcy of it struck me. Life, I realized, doesn't pause for betrayal. The world continues spinning while your personal apocalypse unfolds quietly, invisibly. I began to write it down, first in fragments, then in whole paragraphs. At night, in the dim light of the study, I chronicled my anger, my sorrow, my confusion. I wrote of our past, our moments of love and joy, our failures, our silences. And slowly, writing became a lifeline, a way to separate my identity from the betrayal, a way to reclaim some small part of myself that had been destroyed. I don't know if I will ever fully recover. I don't know if I will ever forgive her or if I will forgive myself for the mistakes that allowed this to happen. But I do know this: surviving is not about forgetting or erasing. It's about learning to carry the weight, about finding a way to breathe again in a world that has been irrevocably altered. Sometimes, in the quiet hours, I imagine telling this story to the world exactly as it happened. No sugarcoating, no judgment, no expectation of understanding. Perhaps it is selfish, perhaps it is therapeutic, but it is the only way I can exist honestly in this life. To acknowledge that I am hurt, betrayed, and yet still here. That life goes on, even when the person you loved most has chosen someone else. And so I remain, a man of 44, betrayed, grieving, yet slowly, painstakingly, trying to reconstruct a life from the fragments left behind. Months turned into a year, and the house, once full of echoes of shared life, became a space occupied more than lived in. Emily had moved into her new rhythm, her new life, and I watched from a distance that felt both near and impossibly far. She no longer hid her phone or her smiles. She no longer glanced at me in fleeting guilt. It was a subtle, cruel liberation for her and a slow death for me. I began to reclaim parts of myself I didn't realize had been lost. I reconnected with old friends, some of whom I hadn't spoken to in years. I traveled alone for the first time since I was in my 20s, to places I had dreamed of but always postponed. In the silence of airports, the endless roads, the hum of trains, I found fragments of freedom. I learned to listen to myself again, not the man defined by routine or marriage, but the man who could still feel curiosity, anger, awe, and occasionally joy. At home, I rearranged things. I removed pictures of us together from the walls, stored away letters and mementos. It wasn't about erasing her, it was about making space for me, for the life that had been overshadowed by betrayal and grief. I started exercising again, cooking meals for myself, reading books I had abandoned. Each small act was an assertion of my existence beyond the pain she had caused. Emily reached out a few times, messages at odd hours, emails with vague apologies or explanations. I read them, sometimes twice, and responded once in a while with civility, nothing more. There was no rekindling, no reconciliation. I realized that wanting to punish or salvage her was pointless. The person I needed to save was me. I was tired of living in the shadow of someone else's choices. And then there was acceptance. It came quietly, without fanfare or epiphany. One evening, I found myself alone on the porch, the sun setting over the neighborhood, the sky painted in colors I had almost forgotten to notice. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel a sting of anger or betrayal. I felt neutral, not healed, not whole, but unburdened enough to breathe, enough to understand that love can be lost, that people can change, that life can continue even after it has been irreversibly altered. I think about Emily less now, not because I have forgotten, but because I no longer need her presence to define my pain or my existence. I still remember the laughter, the intimacy, the nights when everything felt infinite. But I also remember the lies, the secrecy, the quiet agony of watching someone you love choose another. Those memories are mine, and they are part of me, but they do not control me. In the end, the betrayal became a teacher. It taught me patience, resilience, and the uncomfortable truth that people are not always what we believe them to be. It taught me to listen to myself, to honor my own needs, to understand that sometimes love is not enough to prevent loss. And, strangely, it taught me that life, even after heartbreak of this magnitude, continues to offer moments of beauty, of laughter, of small victories that feel monumental precisely because they are hard-won. I am Robert, 45 now, older, wearier, but alive. I have loved, lost, and endured. I will likely love again, cautiously, differently. But I will never forget the lessons I learned, the fragility of trust, the sharpness of betrayal, and the strength it takes to reclaim yourself from the ruins of what you thought was forever. This story isn't about vengeance, or bitterness, or regret alone. It's about survival, about the stubborn insistence of the human heart to continue even after it has been broken. And perhaps that is all any of us can hope for, to endure, to rebuild, and to discover, against all odds, that life is still ours to live.